Yo guys, Theorycraft has dropped an absolutely insane patch that, if you didn't know, reworks the entire leveling system and therefore reworks the entire ability system for the game too. Now, instead of having a max level of 3 that you can put on one ability and a minimum max of 2 for each of the other ones, you have a max of 4. That's where the highest unique ability is for each one, and then all the other ones can reach level 3. This spreads out the power that you gain throughout the game, and just in general, a lot of characters have gotten changed because of it. Characters that had some pretty harsh choices they had to take and choose during the process of playing the game, those characters' lives are a lot better and they are much more consistent overall. On top of characters that are pretty stat checky, getting a lot of benefit from the way that the damage and HP changes scale through the game. And just on top of that, we got some crazy balance changes to namely Brall, and then some extra power up options for Celeste, Eluna, and Void for the max level. All right, so getting right into all of this, we're going to start off with Bishop. Bishop was a character that had very good leveling before because she could get the 3 charges on her dash really quickly, and so there wasn't really like a bunch that you were super desperate to get to. So she doesn't really hyper change because of any of that stuff, but she is also just a very strong character. She didn't get any changes to the actual proper balance changes, but she just is a very consistent character other than that. So before, she was pulling some pretty good numbers. I know some people have some harder times playing her at like lower ranks just because of how commitment based she is, but she's still really high potential, right? So, if you have a lot of skill in the character, she's looking like potentially being like a high A character. And if you're just playing, not put a lot of time in the character, not at the highest ranks, she's somewhere in the top of B. Pretty solid overall. All right, now for Myth. Myth is a very extremely powerful character. Just there's so much this character does. In my opinion, she's the next Brall with how much her kit can do. She has, perma stun, easy knockback. She has the most oppressive anti-heal in the game, AoE damage, huge damage and knockback with her ultimate, consistent damage output with her primary, and the ability to have high mobility and just go through walls with it and bring teammates through it. She's extremely strong. She didn't get any direct changes this patch because it takes a little bit of skill to access her capabilities, but to be honest, I think she's the best character in the game right now. I think she's extraordinarily oppressive, and not only is she good at like high tier scrimming gameplay, but she's just really strong at like any level. Just you walk up, you toss behind the arrows, behind the enemy, and they have nowhere to go and they get split in half, and then you just sit there and ult them and click them, and you don't even have problems with things like an oath shield because it breaks the oath shield since it has explosive damage on the ultimate. Character is insane. Just absolutely nutty character. All right, with Ghost is a character that gets a lot of buffs, and that's because he can be a little bit more difficult to pilot because of his reduced mobility. But having said that, he doesn't really change too much either from the new leveling system changes. He just gets, the consistent problem of not having that mobility, and he can't really resolve it that much throughout the game outside of picking up powers. But just numerically, he's still really strong. His primary fire does a bunch of damage, way more if you hit people with a nade. The nade is super oppressive. The range damage and resets of the giant laser, and I believe you get a reset on the knock, with the nade. There's just so much like insane value this character has. It's just that it can be a little bit difficult to access. So I genuinely think he's at least mid A tier. If you're playing at like a higher tier, maybe drops down to lower B if you don't, right? All right, now on to a character that did get direct changes. We have Brall, and I know I in particular, and I'm sure many of you have been begging for changes to this character because he was the great demon of this video game, but they ended up nerfing his hitbox width by 20%. They now made it so the sweet spot damage applies to compensate for that, it applies to the whole, or instead of the sweet spot that increases his damage being the whole of the hitbox, right, the edge of it, it's just the very tip of like the center of it. So you have to aim better. They also removed bonus damage from the 3rd and 4th consecutive LMBs, and they also, this part is really huge, reduced the empowered attack speed that he gained from getting an 100% extra attack speed, so attacking twice as fast, they dropped that down to 0%. So pretty insane. They also made it so the ult no longer resets at all on Wisp, not like executing a Wisp. And then they reworked the way that his shift functioned. Before, his shift would recover all of the charges when he would, recharge the cooldown, and it was on like a 8 to 10 second cooldown. Now it's on a single dash recovered per cooldown timer. So that is on 10 seconds originally, and then 6 seconds afterwards for any of the other versions. So every 6 seconds, once he's higher level, he's going to get 1 charge back. It is kind of a nerf, but I believe it also takes you a little bit further now. I might be wrong about that. It was like that on the patch that I play tested before. But regardless, this character is still really strong despite that. There's so many things that this character was capable of doing with the stuns, with the dunks, with the massive damage, the execution, the invuln, the other form of anti-heal, the 3 different movement forces. You're just going to have to play him a little bit better. And the thing that I think is going to happen with Brall is that people that were playing Brall are going to realize that they weren't making use of his kit as much as they could. And after a little bit of time, they're going to adapt, and they're not going to feel the changes that much. So I'm going to start him off in A tier. A very high A tier. But if you get good to the character and you're playing him well, I still think he's S tier for sure. But we're going to drop him in A tier. All right. Now on to Jewel. Jewel is a character that did not get any actual changes with the patches, but she is just kind of chilling with the way that the level reworked happened. Nothing super crazy changes about it. She's just more consistent overall, and she still does insane amounts of value. Jewel is a character that I think is underplayed by people. She does require more skill, I think, than some characters. She doesn't quite have the same level of get out of jail free card that like a Brall does, or a Jhin, or something like that. But she does have the ability to wipe a team by herself with the way that her ultimate works. Stacking someone up, hitting them with the ultimate, and then just dash with the iframes. Dash, iframe, dash, iframe, dash, iframe. And as I'm playing with Afro, who's an extraordinary Jewel player, I can tell directly that this character is just obscene at super high levels. So, honestly, the character deserves to be popped into S tier, but I'm going to drop her down into high A tier, underneath Brall, just because of how, if you don't have a bunch of value or a bunch of time in the character, you're not going to get close to matching and maximizing all this you can do. So A tier-ish. All right, now on to Void. Void is a little bit of a tricky one. I think Void's inherent power is obscene. They keep buffing the ever-loving crap out of this character, just buffing his damage of his primaries, buffing the range of it, buffing the speed at which his like black hole damage, or the point and click black hole increases and explodes, and then making his swap faster and making his empowered state easier to access. And he's just getting buffs every single patch, and he did get a buff this patch too, where now when he uses his Void Snap, he is slowed less by 25%. And then they gave him a new version of a level 4 upgrade, or max level upgrade, where he gains an additional 50 movement speed for 2 seconds when he uses the Void Snap, and then gets an additional 100 movement speed for 2 seconds when he lands it, right? So a lot of extra little mobility. But on top of that, he also got a new version of his shift that makes it so any allies that he teleports gets a 300 HP shield. And these are huge extra little buffs that we're just giving for like no good reason. But where does this actually put Void? The issue with Void is that Void's mobility is still pretty garbage, and you can be left pretty high and dry if you're playing like ranked, right? And since this is a ranked tier list just for the boys, he doesn't get as high as he should. In terms of like scrim potential, he's definitely like high A. I think this character has some kind of nonsense that they can do. Just jump padding in, getting some damage in, dropping a massive huge black hole. It's her ultimate, it's just obscene. But for ranked, not the best. The character has a really hard time escaping and surviving, and that's what you need for ranked right now, and also the ability to chase down enemies. That's a huge issue with Void. And as you can notice with these characters, you're going to see a lot more of mobility with the characters cast. Myth, insane mobility. Brall, insane mobility. Jewel, really, really good. Ghost, is dragging him down a little bit, but it's still pretty good. And then Bishop is getting pulled down by her difficulty to play, but her mobility is insane. Right. So that's why we're putting Void at like lower B. All right. moving on to Shiv. Shiv is a character that I think has gone under the radar for a long time, just because of characters like Brall and Jhin being so ridiculous and them filling a very similar role to her. And so while Shiv didn't actually get any direct changes this patch, I still think that she's really strong. And so with like Brall getting nerfed a little bit, she's going to be climbing up the ladder a little bit, just with how insanely powerful her ultimate is and the resets are. And yes, she does require more work to properly play, but she still has a lot of the huge mobility that she can escape with. She scales really well with picking up certain items like a grappling hook or a blink dagger, right? And so you're going to see a lot of value from getting those sorts of things. But in general, with the ability to go sit there and go AFK farm and get your ultimate and not having to play the game without it or like fight to get it, Shiv is getting some pretty huge increases. And we're slipping her under Jewel here. All right, next we have Celeste. Celeste got some fun, interesting reworks where now she can place her ult or her wall down prior. So she pops the wall and it stays and then reactivates it to hold it in place for 6 seconds, which is a unique new option. I'm actually excited to see things like this, I think. She got a flat buff to her wall health of 500 HP. And then the time to cast the ability was reduced by 0.25 seconds. So those are all like huge buffs. A lot of times with Celeste, you would get caught like casting it. Like you go to cast it and then Brall would shimmy past it and then he would sit there and crap on you while you were stuck in animation. So it helps with things like that. It's all a huge little freelo increase, right? On top of that, we get some changes to the way her spear works. Her spear's damage now does 30% to 150% damage based on distance traveled. So it's not an objective buff, but if you're using and poking with these at range, you can get some pretty good value. But alternatively, they made it so she now slows between 40% to 10% based on how close the target is. So when at range, you're able to poke for more damage and you're not getting the value out of the slow, but at close range, you can pop people for some pretty heavy slows at close range. So it gives you flexibility, and flexibility lets you play the character better, get more value. So I think it's a buff, right? And then she got a fun little extra upgrade to the way her shift works. Whenever you dash over the abyss on Celeste, you now create an ice island, which isn't, like Bebo does. It's not really something I would say is meta necessarily. It can be used in a pinch to like, if you need to go escape with your team out in the abyss and keep dashing across and stand there forever with the most wanted. Something like that could be really valuable. But she gets a lot of value out of exploiting her ability to easily spike people as they chase her in the abyss, and making it so that there's land underneath her when she dashes is kind of like counteracting. But so how does this actually make Celeste change? Overall, Celeste was pretty low tier prior to this, but having the new flexibility of the wall, the increase in the wall, the cast time, and then the adjustment to her spears, she's gotten pretty heftily buffed, I would say. I used to pop her down to like C tier, and I think now I'm putting her at like a high B tier in like basic gameplay. But when it comes to like putting some time in the character and getting good value, if you're good at the character, you can get into the A tier. So we're dropping her at B, but she gets up into A. Right, so Shrike. Shrike is pretty controversial, I know. You guys probably think that she's insane, and she is when you're playing with people that don't know how to play around her, or you don't know how to play around her, of like bypassing her damage and diving her and stuff like that. But she's really not that great. She has pretty limited mobility, so she struggles to save her teammates when trying to escape or go res. And the characters that could just jump on her and blow her up are really strong right now. Like Brall's really strong. Jewel can mess her up. Jhin can definitely mess her up. Shiv can mess her up, and so she kind of struggles. And Oath is strong too, and Oath can just mess her up also. So realistically, the lower tier you are playing at, then she could get into like an A or a B, but like realistically, she's like a C. I wouldn't recommend playing her. She falls off. So you might find yourself getting stuck at a certain rank playing a character like, right. So on to Jhin. Jhin is the definition of what you need to be having in ranked. You can chase down all the kills from a fight because you're the fastest character in the game, and you can run away when your team's losing. Easy clap. on top of that, he just, as much as he got nerfed, they reduced his the dash impulse on his primary fire. So like when he would do the bunny hopping, right, it would increase his movement speed, and they reduced it by 10 to 40% based on the timing. So like 10% at the start and then 40% on the later portion of it. But he can still just move around all he wants, really. It didn't change that much. They also reduced the damage by 5%, but whatever. Doesn't change that much about him. Character's still pretty obscene. And so he's getting into S tier. He can be a little bit difficult to pilot too, but if you just figure out the combo of charging up your attack, dashing on the enemy, punching them in the face with it, and then comboing, you'll kill the vast majority of characters in the game. Okay, so the devs are going back into their exciting little monkey paws. What are we doing with Hudson? Why does this character exist? Nonsense. And so, gosh, I'm sorry. I'm just reading the thing. It says, after the great de-Hudsoning of last year, we've been slowly shifting power to areas where we think he should be strong. Specifically when he's set up and hunkered down. And it's just like, I just have no clue what they're doing with him. Anyway, if you weren't aware about his previous buffs, they made it so the range on his barbed wires are really far, and that stuff's extraordinarily oppressive. But now they've swapped the range of the base LMB and the empowered LMB. So the base attack range has been reduced from 1300 to 1150 units, and the empowered attack, so the full charge version, is 1150 to 1300. This is an objective buff. You only attack with the charged up version. Don't know why they're doing this. And so honestly, this character, it has a high potential, like a high skill ceiling for, kind of. He has a high skill or high value ceiling with how he can use his barbed wires to stop people from engaging on him and just sit there and bully them, and while still having solid movement, right? And the ability to kite people and stop them from getting on top of him, because you can just block off corridors with the barbed wire and just bully him. This character is low-key pretty darn good. And he's easy to play. I genuinely think he's in the A category minimum. Ugh, gross. Alright, Bebo. So, Bebo was pretty dang garbage, but they decided to make him a little bit less garbage. They increased his toughness from 3 to 3.5, which is a weird little hidden stat, but it basically means he's going to be getting some... He has better scaling for HP items. So you can go HP items, which weren't really that good in the first place. And they increase his base health by 50, so not much of a difference. They increased the damage of his bomb by 10% at all levels. That's notable. And they made it so the fire zeep damage over time does lethal damage, doesn't matter. And gave some bug fixes for how the cart works, where it just doesn't insta break when it's near things and it's more usable. Bottom line, Bebo still sucks. Sorry. Maybe C tier. If you're really good at Bebo, you're getting up into B. If you're not that good at him, you're in D. Bebo's a pretty low C tier, though. I don't know, we'll just pop him into D. This character's pretty trash. You just outpoke him if you poke, or you jump on top of him and blow him up if you do that kind of thing, too. Bebo's just really not it. Movement's pretty dang terrible. Really hard to go res. You will not get a lot of rank points on this character. Right, so Felix got a sort of nerf. Felix got his toughness reduced from 4.5 to 4, so with the way that his HP was scaling. Granted, a lot of people who are playing Felix tend to play like damage builds anyway, I believe. And so that doesn't really change that much. But the way that he scales and gets stat checky with the game is apparently making him quite strong in this playtest. His movement's still pretty good, so, you know, he has that on it. Not insane. It's really not that good. It's like, okay, right? But with the leveling changes and the ability for him to go access his ultimate easier, that's a huge buff to him. Any character that relies on their ult, that can just go farm and get their ult, you get a lot of extra value on that, right? So now we're looking at, instead of him being pretty lower C tier, maybe we're looking at higher B tier, I'd say. He's pretty easy to play too, so you can get some solid value on him in ranked. Play with a squad and you'll get a lot of extra value, I think, on this character. Soloing, maybe not the best. Right, so Kingpin. This one's probably going to be controversial too, because I know people hate playing Kingpin, because Kingpin's hate playing against Kingpin, because he is a very extreme character. If he lands on a stun on you, you die. That, again, a story, basically. So what is he actually in terms of power, though? A lot of the invisibility stuff they nerfed. So you have to get a full combo with the mana battery, and the way that you like dash and stuff like that, it takes you out on the delicate disguise and even with the mana battery invisibility cloak. And on top of the Night Stalker soul also. So that nerfs him down a little bit, but realistically, a character that has to have good powers to get a lot of value will struggle in ranked. Especially if they have as bad movement as Kingpin does. Kingpin is kind of falling into like the Void category where he just lacks some mobility. And despite getting some buffs in certain manners with like the level 4 way that his shift can be used to spam a bunch of damage out. Yeah, he's really just not that great, low-key. I grew up Void tierish. You really have to compensate for his weaknesses, and that's can be. Alright, Oath. Oath, character that I play an absolute metric buttload of. Oath got a bug fix that went under the radar and wasn't talked about, which is huge for him, where prior to this, the upgrade for his shield that made it so he had to, or like that would let his shield recover faster, got fixed. It wasn't working before, and now it's working. It used to not recover his shield for 6 seconds, and then with the upgrade, it's now down to 4, and it recovers like twice as fast. And I believe it also makes it recover faster when it gets broken. So that's a huge little extra buff that is at no cost at all. They did make him scale differently. He is a little bit weaker in his shield health before at lower levels, but realistically, if you just drop and farm a bit, you'll get to level 6 or something very easily. And he is less punishing for how he levels up now. Before, I had to choose to like not level up my shift until like, and the second time until level 6, which was kind of hard, right? It was a bit of a struggle. But with the way that you can choose like half values, right? Like getting the shift from the dash from 1 to 2. Now there's 3 stages of it. You can go for like a half stage. You get a little bit of cooldown reduction without having to fully commit and stop yourself from maxing out your healing, which I'm still doing. Might not, but there's options. The point is, character got buffed, and while he is a very hard character to play, having higher max shield health at the end, just from the way that the other shield changes were, with the way that like the 3rd level upgrade is now just like extra health, so you're getting like extra base shield health on top of having it recover faster. It's going to make him a lot more easy to play. He's a very strong character. I think while he's like A tier in terms of like raw value, he's S tier in terms of necessity. So we're dropping him in A tier. Just, it's going to take a long time to get good at this character. You let your shield break and your character's D instantly. And it's hard to manage that properly with a lot of characters having explosive damage. So good luck on that one. Yeah. All right. Zeph. Zeph is another character that people don't really notice that is quite as good as he is. They did end up nerfing his bunny hopping. So you used to be able to like cast the primary fire and then jump, and then sometimes glide with it too. And you could get a lot of extra movement that like people couldn't catch up to you with while you were damaging them because you're flinging the attack backwards. They made it so each bunny hop after the first is 90% as effective. So it's gradually decreasing and preserving momentum. And this effect like resets every 6 seconds, basically. Or like after 6 seconds after stop, right? So he did get nerfed, but the character is quite good. And I think he's another character that scales, that was having to make some harsh choices about his scaling. And so he's getting the ability to not have to do that as much now. And so you can go on ahead and avoid a lot of that stuff. He also benefits from not having to be away from his ultimate as long, and really being able to just level up and get access to the later abilities, because he's combo based, and so the more powerful those combos are, the even better he is, right? Compared to a character like Shrike, whose majority of her damage is just under primary fire. But we're gonna drop Zeph into like low A. I think it's reasonable. All right. Next character that got some huge changes, Aluna. Aluna made it so her heal of her ultimate is now 500% more effective on Wisp, which is a bonkers number. But basically it means that you can't just stomp or have your Wisp stomp that you're healing when it's at like when it's going at it. And it basically makes it so in uncoordinated play, anything that you pop the ult on, you're going to be able to res. That's a huge buff. They gave her a huge increase on her level 4 upgrade of her dash, which is a new one, where Upon picking up an ally wisp, if your cooldown is above 2 seconds, the cooldown is immediately set to 2 seconds, which is just nutty. Character will have insane movement now. And they made it so she has another option to upgrade the root ability to have a detonation radius that is increased by 100%. And that's a radius increased by 100%. So the amount of like the area of increase of this is something like, I don't know, probably like maybe like 200% increase. It's huge. The thing is like absolutely insanely massive now. And so some of these problems that Aluna suffered from of having like this difference in like raw value, she got a big increase, and her fishing for her ranged roots is a huge buff now, and she's way stronger at that, and her ultimate is just so much more reliable. So popping her in A tier, and her movement's pretty dang good too. So, you know, like we talked about, really good for range.